Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When architect Alec Rivera moved into his sleek Lakeview villa, he expected solitude, not war. But when his HOA tried to force a stranger into his home under the guise of community support, Alec uncovered a web of lies, forged documents, and a housing scam more twisted than fiction. My name is Alec Rivera. I'm 37, a licensed architect based out of Austin, Texas. I design things for a living: buildings, homes, spaces that make sense, clean lines, strong foundations. Which is probably why the idea of living in a suburban HOA-controlled circus has always made my skin crawl. I like order, but I like freedom more. After my divorce, I got the villa. That was the only thing we didn't fight over. My ex-wife wanted to be in the city close to her office and her Pilates cult. I wanted peace, quiet, and 5,000 square feet of modern glass, concrete, and Lakeview perfection on the edge of Crystal Pines. The villa was one of the first homes built in that area, long before the HOA was incorporated. The original zoning maps excluded it from any HOA jurisdiction, even though the neighborhood grew around it like a ring of ivy choking a tree. I was the tree. I owned it outright. No dues, no meetings, no committees. Just me, my espresso machine, my rooftop patio, and the occasional bald eagle overhead, pretending to be majestic while trying to steal my dog's chew toys. Crystal Pines itself was fine. It looked like a place where Pinterest boards go to die, row after row of identical homes in various shades of beige and HOA-compliant sorrow. My villa stuck out like a yacht in a kiddie pool. Floor-to-ceiling windows, infinity pool, concrete and copper accents. When I moved in, a few neighbors waved politely. Some stared. One man actually came up and said, "I thought this was an art gallery," and then walked away without explanation. A few weeks after settling in, I got a letter in my mailbox, an invitation to a Crystal Pines HOA general meeting. I almost threw it away out of habit, but then I saw a line that piqued my curiosity. Discussion of temporary housing initiatives for distressed residents. It sounded vague enough to be dangerous. I marked the date. The meeting was held in the local community center, an aggressively beige building that looked like it had been designed by someone allergic to fun. I walked in wearing jeans and a black button-down, while most people looked like they had fallen out of a J. Crew catalog. I got a few looks. I recognized one face: Felicia McBride, the HOA president. Silver bob, ice blue suit. The kind of woman who probably sued her florist once for including the wrong shade of white roses. She stood at the podium with the stiff posture of someone who never relaxed, not even in her sleep. After the usual mumbo-jumbo, budget updates, landscaping complaints, one man ranting about a raccoon that targeted his mailbox, Felicia cleared her throat and introduced a special item on the agenda. As part of our evolving commitment to mutual care and dignity, she said in a smooth, chilly voice, the board has discussed the possibility of providing temporary housing to members of our community undergoing significant hardship. I sat up a little straighter. That wasn't just vague, it was wide open. There is a member of my own family, she continued, who has recently suffered a personal crisis and is in need of a stable environment while rebuilding her life. It is our belief that Crystal Pines, as a supportive and progressive community, can provide that. Someone asked from the back, "Are we talking about putting her in an Airbnb or—" Felicia smiled, and I swear the temperature in the room dropped by 3 degrees. No, ideally a generous resident with the space and means would volunteer a temporary accommodation, just for a few months. There was silence. Then, from the left side of the room, a voice I didn't recognize said, "Well, what about that big house up on Hillcrest? The glass one, 5 bedrooms. Isn't it just one guy living there?" There were murmurs. I felt 30 pairs of eyes shift toward me like I had just grown antlers. I raised a brow and said nothing. My face remained neutral. Internally, I was somewhere between disbelief and violent laughter. Felicia didn't look at me. She just smiled that same smile and moved on to the next agenda item like someone hadn't just nominated me to host a stranger like I was running a goddamn boarding house. After the meeting, no one approached me, not even Felicia. It was like the whole thing had been a suggestion tossed into the wind, except I had the distinct feeling it had landed hard. I walked back to my car in silence, wondering whether I should have skipped that meeting after all. I didn't have to wait long to find out whether that bizarre HOA meeting had been some kind of fever dream or an actual plan in motion. The next morning, just before 8, I stepped outside to grab the paper. Yes, I still get a physical newspaper, sue me, and found something in the mailbox that wasn't newsprint. A thick manila envelope, unmarked except for a Crystal Pines HOA letterhead, and an aggressive font that practically screamed, "You're going to regret opening this." Inside was a printed letter, single-spaced, signed in blue ink, Felicia's name at the bottom in her angular authoritarian scrawl. It started politely enough. "Dear Mr. Rivera," it said, "we appreciate your presence in our community and hope you're enjoying your stay at 47 Hillcrest Drive." Then it got weird. As discussed at the recent meeting, the HOA has voted in favor of extending a temporary housing assignment for a fellow community member in crisis. As a show of solidarity and neighborhood cooperation, your residence has been selected as the ideal location for this initiative. My residence has been selected, like I was a hotel or a menu item. The letter went on. Michelle McBride, a recently divorced mother of 2, will be staying at your residence for a period not to exceed 90 days. This timeline may be subject to review, depending on her circumstances and the board's discretion. Then came the kicker. We recognize that as a non-member of the HOA, your property is not technically bound by our covenants. However, due to its placement within Crystal Pines and the implications for community aesthetics and unity, we expect your full cooperation. Should you decline to participate, we reserve the right to pursue remedies under local zoning ordinances concerning the misuse of oversized residential structures and disruption to the harmonious landscape of our development. I had to read that part 3 times. They were threatening me with zoning violations because I wasn't sharing my 5-bedroom home with a complete stranger. Correction, because I wasn't handing over my house to the HOA president's sister. I dropped the letter onto the kitchen counter, poured myself a cup of coffee, and called the one person who could translate this madness into legal language. My attorney, Candace Ellis. Candace had helped me navigate the property purchase after my divorce. She was sharp, fast-talking, and allergic to bullshit. After I read her the letter, there was a pause. Then she said, "That's one of the most manipulative pieces of HOA fiction I've ever heard." "Can they actually do anything?" I asked. "No. They're trying to scare you. Your deed is clean. The HOA has no jurisdiction, but this wording about misuse of residential structures is designed to rattle you into compliance." "Well, it's not working," she chuckled. "Good. I'll draft an official response. Keep the letter. Don't respond verbally. No emails. And if anyone shows up, don't open the door without calling me first." She emailed me a formal cease and desist notice by the afternoon. I printed it and hand-delivered it to the Crystal Pines administrative office, sliding it through the locked drop box like a man delivering ransom instructions. That evening, I noticed something new posted on the HOA bulletin boards throughout the neighborhood. Laminated notices, bright pastel headers, big bold letters. Unit 47 extends temporary housing for community member in crisis. Below was a paragraph about how the Crystal Pines HOA was proud to support residents in times of need and how the homeowner at 47 Hillcrest had generously agreed to participate in a humanitarian program to house a displaced member of our extended family. Extended family. Cute. I yanked one of the flyers down and stormed back into the house. I didn't even have time to start shredding it when my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. 10 seconds later, another call. Same number. Then a third. On the 4th ring, I answered. "Alec Rivera," the voice said, breathless and smug. "Who's this?" "This is Michelle, Felicia's sister. I just wanted to say thank you. I'm so grateful you're doing this. My kids and I were so worried about where we'd go." There was a pause. I didn't say a word. "I'm having the movers come tomorrow around 10. I figured you'd want a heads up. I'm allergic to cats, by the way, and the boys are a little loud, but they're sweet. And we're a no-shoe household. Hope that's okay." I hung up. No rage, no threats, no argument. Just a hard, clean hang-up. 10 minutes later, I installed an extra security latch on the front door. The next morning started with birdsong, filtered light, and the low rumble of a moving truck backing into my driveway like it owned the place. I stared at it from the upstairs balcony, toothbrush in hand. A standard white panel van with the words Swift Relocations stenciled in cheerful orange letters across the side. I watched as the back doors opened and out came boxes, suitcases, a collapsible dog crate. Then came a tall brunette in sunglasses, a crop top, and high-waisted jeans. She looked like someone who had once modeled for JCPenney in the 90s and never got the memo that the world moved on. Michelle. Behind her were two boys, maybe 10 and 12, and a golden retriever that looked more stressed than loyal. One of the boys kicked a soccer ball into my landscaping and cheered. Michelle walked to the front door with purpose, carrying what looked like a reusable shopping bag and the confidence of someone who believed this was already hers. I headed downstairs, still in a t-shirt and joggers, and opened the front door before she reached it. She smiled like we were old friends. "Morning. I know we're a little early. The movers offered me a discount if I scheduled before noon." "There's been a misunderstanding," I said, keeping my hand on the frame. Michelle tilted her head like a confused influencer. "I don't think so. My sister said everything was arranged." "Well, your sister lied." She blinked, then forced a laugh. "You're joking." "I'm not. You are not moving in here. I didn't agree to this. And your things need to go back on the truck. Immediately." Her smile slipped. "I don't think you understand. The HOA board voted, I don't give a damn if they lit incense and chanted around a bonfire. This is my home. It's not available, it never was, and it never will be." She looked stunned for a second, then furious. "You're going to put my children on the street? Don't put that on me. You were never invited." Michelle turned and dialed her phone. "Felicia," she said, pacing across the driveway. "Yeah, he's refusing. No, he's being rude. Yes, I need the letter." I heard the phrase enforcement clause and knew things were about to get stupider. 10 minutes later, a Crystal Pines HOA branded black SUV rolled up. Two uniformed men stepped out, private security, not police. One carried a clipboard. The other wore mirrored aviators like he was auditioning for a low-budget SWAT team. The clipboard guy walked up, all professional swagger. "Mr. Rivera, I'm here to present a letter from the Crystal Pines Board of Housing Standards." He handed it over like it was a court summons. I didn't take it. "Not interested," I said. "This property is not under HOA jurisdiction. This letter outlines a temporary placement authorized by board resolution." "I'm calling the police," I said, pulling out my phone. Michelle made a disgusted noise. "You're seriously escalating this? You showed up at my house with a moving truck. Your refusal is violating a community ordinance," the guard insisted. "No, it isn't," I said, dialing. The local police arrived within 10 minutes. 2 officers in a cruiser, 1 male, 1 female, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. I explained the situation calmly, showed them the deed, the documents Candace had prepared, and even the original zoning map that excluded my parcel from the HOA district. The officers reviewed everything, nodded, and politely turned to Michelle. "Ma'am," the male officer said, "unfortunately, Mr. Rivera is correct. This home is not under HOA jurisdiction. You'll need to leave the premises." Michelle's eyes welled with instant performative tears. "But I have nowhere else to go." "My kids." "We're not removing you by force," the female officer said gently. "But if you remain here after this notice, it will be considered trespassing." Michelle muttered something under her breath about lawsuits and male privilege and stormed off to the truck. The kids followed, dragging backpacks. The dog climbed in with visible relief. The guards didn't even apologize. They just nodded and got back into their SUV, probably to go enforce someone's lawn height violations. As the truck rolled out, I stood at the top of the driveway and watched it vanish down the hill. I wasn't relieved. Not yet. Something in Michelle's voice, that smug little, "this isn't over," stuck to me like a splinter under the skin. I went inside and locked the door behind me. Then I printed out 5 more copies of the deed because I had a feeling I'd need them. For the next few days, nothing happened. No trucks, no letters, no calls. Just the usual rhythm: coffee, emails, sketching design concepts on the patio. While my dog snored under the table, it felt like the storm had passed. Then the water shut off. I was brushing my teeth when the stream from the faucet stuttered, coughed, and died. I checked the kitchen sink. Same. Showers? Dry. I called the city utility department, thinking maybe it was a scheduled outage. The rep sounded confused. "There's no outage in your area," she said. "Looks like a safety shutdown request was submitted for your address. Cited a plumbing hazard." "What hazard?" Just says potential structural concern, HOA Memo 12B. I'm not even part of an HOA. That's odd, she said. We'll escalate and investigate. Should be back within 24 hours. It wasn't. The next morning, the gas was off too. I stood in my cold kitchen, wrapped in a hoodie, staring at the unlit stove, while the coffee machine blinked at me like it had given up hope. I called Candace again. She sighed so hard I could hear it echo through the phone. They're tampering with the utilities now, I said. They're trying to force you out. Keep every receipt. Log every call. Photograph everything. Already doing that. I walked outside to clear my head and saw that my car, my perfectly legal, properly parked car, was gone. Towed. The HOA's safety officer had apparently flagged it for obstructing community access, even though I was parked in my own damn driveway. I spent half the day at the impound lot, paid $250 in cash, and drove home with the sense that I was no longer living in a neighborhood. I was in a slow-motion siege. And then came the wall. Overnight, someone, probably HOA contractors, had installed 10-foot-tall opaque screens along the entire perimeter of my property, tall plastic barriers in dull gray, zip-tied to temporary fencing poles, blocking my lake view, blocking the sun, blocking everything. A small laminated sign explained that these were temporary visual isolation panels installed to reduce community stress and promote uniformity of scenery. Uniformity of scenery, that was a new one. I laughed. I actually laughed standing there in the grass looking at what essentially amounted to a visual quarantine zone around my home, like I was a disease that needed to be contained. I called Candace again. They've blocked sunlight now, I said. That's bordering on harassment. Bordering? She told me to start documenting this for a formal complaint and a potential civil suit. But we're not quite at the point where the police will step in, she warned. They're pushing just under the legal threshold, death by paperwork. That evening, a neighborhood kid threw an egg at my mailbox. I didn't even flinch. I just took a photo of it, wiped it off, and made a note in my growing folder, Incidents. Crystal Pines, HOA, Psychological Warfare Division. I installed 2 more security cameras, bought a second external hard drive to back up all the footage. That night, my power flickered 3 times and finally stabilized around midnight. I sat in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, scrolling through building codes, legal case precedents, and HOA lawsuit articles like I was studying for the bar. They wanted me uncomfortable, isolated. They wanted me to break. Too bad I was already broken once and survived it. This wasn't going to be the thing that brought me down. I got home late that night. I'd had dinner with Candace and her partner at some gastro pub downtown, mostly to get away from the HOA circus for a few hours. I even laughed a little over drinks. Something about the word uniformity of scenery still made her snort into her gin. But as I pulled into the driveway just past 10, my headlights caught something strange. The front porch light was on. I hadn't left it on. A cold wave passed through me. I parked slowly, got out, and walked to the door. No signs of forced entry, at least not obvious ones, but the deadbolt had been tampered with. I could tell. One of the screws was halfway out. The latch plate was loose. I pushed the door open and was hit with the smell of pizza, cheap candles, and wet dog. Someone was inside. I stepped cautiously into the foyer, and there she was, Michelle McBride. Sprawled on my sectional couch, barefoot, holding a glass of wine like she owned the place. Her 2 boys were in the upstairs hallway, laughing at something on a tablet. Her golden retriever was chewing one of my running shoes. I stood frozen in the doorway. Michelle looked up, smiled like we were roommates. "Oh good, you're back. I was starting to worry you'd changed your mind about letting us stay. You broke into my house." No, she said, waving the wine. "I didn't break anything. The door wasn't even locked when I got here." "It was locked." "Well, it didn't seem like it," she said too quickly. "You're trespassing. I'm calling the police." She stood up slowly, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Look, Alec, there's no need to make this ugly. The HOA approved this. I've got documentation." She walked over to the coffee table and picked up a printed lease agreement. I took one look at the signature line and my stomach turned. It had my name on it. My actual name. My handwriting. Or at least a very good forgery of it. My signature had been pasted onto a fake rental contract dated 2 weeks ago with language about emergency placement, temporary tenancy, and a rent amount of $0. "This is a forgery," I said, flat and cold. "It's filed with the HOA," she said. "It's official." "You seriously think I'm going to let this slide?" Michelle stepped closer, trying to play nice. We just need a few months, Alec. I've got nowhere else to go, and it's a big house. You won't even notice us. You broke into my house. I accessed an unoccupied property under documented approval, she snapped. Call the cops if you want, but they'll see this and realize it's just a misunderstanding. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't curse or throw anything. I pulled out my phone, tapped the hidden app for my internal cameras, and hit record. I had her on video, standing there, justifying an illegal entry, waving around a fraudulent contract. Then I stepped outside and called the police. They arrived 15 minutes later. 2 officers, different ones this time. I met them outside, handed over copies of the deed, the no HOA documentation, the fake lease, and showed them the footage of Michelle walking around inside like she was auditioning for a home makeover show. But Michelle played her part. When the officers entered, she had the kids snuggled on the couch, the dog resting peacefully, the forged lease printed and laid out like a centerpiece. She told them she was here with consent, that the HOA had facilitated the move, that she had nowhere else to go. One officer came out and pulled me aside. Sir, I understand your position and I believe you, but she has what appears to be a signed lease. Whether it's legitimate or not will have to be determined in court. You're not removing her. We can't. It's a civil matter at this point. You'll need to file for unlawful detainer. Once you have a court order, we can act. And until then, she stays, unfortunately. Michelle smiled at me through the living room window like she'd just won the lottery. I didn't go back inside. I grabbed a bag, booked a room at a hotel, and texted Candace from the parking lot. She's in. With a fake lease. I need to burn them all to the ground. She responded within 5 minutes. Good. Now it's criminal. Let's go to war. I didn't sleep that night. Not much anyway. The hotel room was decent. Clean sheets, blackout curtains, a half-functional thermostat. But my brain was a war room. While Michelle and her freeloading entourage spread out across my floors, probably pawing through my things, I sat hunched over my laptop collecting every shred of documentation I had. Deed records, property surveys, email chains with the builder, original plat maps showing my lot outside the HOA district lines, photos of Michelle inside the house, the video clip where she claimed she had permission. Candace called at 7 a.m. before I even finished my first coffee. I spoke with a judge I know, she said. We'll fast-track an unlawful detainer filing, but that's just the beginning. If what you sent me is real, and it is, this is moving into criminal territory. What about the lease? It's fake. The signature's clearly lifted from your closing documents. I compared it to what I filed last year. I could feel my jaw clench. So they had access to my files. Either the HOA's board got it from public records and tampered, or they forged it from scratch. Doesn't matter. Both are felonies. By noon, Candace had filed a motion in district court for unlawful detainer, plus a formal complaint alleging document forgery, trespass, and civil conspiracy. The judge scheduled a preliminary hearing for the following week. But it was the next thing she said that stopped me cold. There's more, Candace added. I found something interesting in the HOA's recent board meeting minutes. They submitted a resolution dated after the alleged lease, claiming that you gave verbal consent to house Michelle. Verbal? They backed it up with a copy of an email from you. It's not your address. They're forging emails now? Looks like it. Whoever wrote it copied your tone almost perfectly. But they got one thing wrong. You never capitalize regards. I knew it wasn't you. I stared at the hotel ceiling for a long second, then said, Candace, I want blood. We'll settle for convictions, she said. Over the next 3 days, I moved methodically. I met with a digital forensic specialist, Candace's contact, who confirmed that the email was spoofed. We recovered IP addresses, metadata, even a timestamp. It was sent from a private server registered to Crystal Pines HOA. Meanwhile, Michelle wasn't exactly laying low. She posted on the neighborhood Facebook group, gushing about how blessed she was to have found temporary shelter thanks to the generosity of the community. Photos of her dog on my leather sofa, her kids playing with my VR headset. One shot of her in the pool, wine glass in hand, captioned, healing. Neighbors commented with heart emojis and, you deserve this, messages. One even dropped off a lasagna, which I can only assume now stains my refrigerator shelf. But the cherry on top came Friday evening when I received a voicemail from an anonymous tipper, female voice, disguised slightly. I think you should know, Michelle has done this before, Two other neighborhoods, same playbook, HOA protection. Emotional sob story, fake lease. They call it crisis rotation. Check developments in Travis County and Stone Ridge. Candace followed up and confirmed it. There were records of prior civil disputes involving Michelle McBride. Temporary placements via informal HOA resolutions. One ended in court, the other settled quietly. This is organized, Candace said, and it's bigger than just your house. That night, I drove past my villa slowly, headlights off like I was casing the joint. From the street, I saw silhouettes inside. Michelle pacing the hallway on her phone, the TV glowing, the dog curled up in my reading chair. She thought she had won. But what she didn't know was that everything, from the email to the lease to the entire stunt, was now part of a criminal investigation. Monday morning, I walked into the Travis County Courthouse wearing my best Navy suit and a stare that could cut steel. Candace was already there, armed with 2 briefcases, 1 digital forensics report, and the righteous fury of someone who really, really hated HOAs. We didn't come to negotiate. We came to detonate. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, wasted no time. Michelle showed up in leggings and oversized sunglasses like she thought she was heading to brunch, not court. Felicia wasn't present. Instead, the HOA sent their in-house counsel, a weasel named Brent Calloway, who immediately started talking about miscommunications and good faith initiatives. The judge raised one eyebrow and said, "We'll see." Candace opened with the deed, zoning maps, and the original exclusion of my property from Crystal Pines HOA jurisdiction. She laid out the timeline like a prosecutor, the HOA letter, the forged lease, the fake email, the Facebook posts, the anonymous tip. Then she dropped the digital forensics report onto the judge's desk like a bomb. The email, she said, was fabricated using an unregistered domain routed through a VPN. The IP address traces to a static server maintained by the Crystal Pines HOA board. Brent fumbled. Michelle shifted in her seat, like it had suddenly become electrified. "And the lease?" the judge asked. Candace slid over a side-by-side signature comparison, digitally cut and pasted from Mr. Rivera's real estate closing documents. The judge sighed. "So this isn't a civil dispute. It's a fraud case." That's when 2 plainclothes detectives entered the room. Candace had looped them in through the DA's office the night before. They didn't say much, just handed the judge a file and nodded. The judge skimmed through it, then looked up at Michelle. "Ms. McBride, I'm placing you under investigation for trespass, document fraud, and potential conspiracy to commit housing fraud. You are ordered to vacate the property within 24 hours. Michelle opened her mouth to argue, but the judge wasn't done. Furthermore, due to evidence of repeated fraudulent housing arrangements under the pretext of HOA-sanctioned emergencies, this matter is being escalated to the county prosecutor. If the allegations hold, you may face felony charges." Michelle went pale. The court adjourned, and I walked out feeling lighter than I had in weeks. But that wasn't the end. 2 days later, the Crystal Pines HOA office was raided by investigators. Computers were seized, phones confiscated. Felicia McBride was handcuffed in her own driveway wearing pearls and a tracksuit, both of which looked deeply offended to be involved. The charges were serious: falsifying HOA records, misuse of community funds, forgery, and conspiracy. Turns out this wasn't just about Michelle. The investigation uncovered that the board had been siphoning funds for years. Legal fees, crisis housing stipends, even paying private investigators to dig up dirt on resistant homeowners. They'd created a whole ecosystem of coercion masked as community support. Michelle had been rotated through at least 3 other homes across 2 counties using fake leases and HOA cover letters. Each time, the HOA pressured the homeowner, citing fake bylaws and veiled legal threats. Most gave in. One went bankrupt, another moved out of state. But not me. The news broke within a week. Local outlets ran the headline: "Architect fights HOA scam, uncovers countywide housing fraud ring." Photos of my villa, Michelle in handcuffs, Felicia looking like a frozen wax statue. Candace received calls from 5 other attorneys in the area, all with clients who'd been bullied by HOAs in similar ways. A class action suit started forming before the dust even settled. I returned to my villa 3 days after the court ruling. The kids were gone. The dog hair was vacuumed. A single bottle of rosé remained in the fridge, along with a post-it note from Michelle that read, "No hard feelings." I fed it to the garbage disposal. It took a full month for the dust to settle. By the time the last court filing was stamped and archived, Felicia McBride had been indicted on 4 felony counts: fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and misappropriation of community funds. Her bail was set high enough to make her blink for the first time in public memory. She made a statement through her attorney blaming procedural confusion and bad legal advice. No one bought it. Michelle didn't fare much better. The DA's office formally charged her with trespassing, falsifying housing documents, and interfering with a lawfully held property title. But the real hit came when Child Protective Services got involved. Turns out her boys had missed weeks of school. They were living in a constant state of transience, shuffled between strangers' homes with no consistency, no guardianship plan, and, most damning, no legal right to reside in any of those places. Temporary custody was granted to their biological father, a teacher from Round Rock who'd filed for sole custody years ago. Michelle left the courthouse in handcuffs and silence. The HOA, meanwhile, collapsed like a rotting scaffold. After the raid, a forensic audit revealed that over $100,000 had been siphoned through legal contingency and administrative outreach accounts. Turns out administrative outreach was HOA code for Fund Michelle's Wine Habit and Uber rides. The entire board resigned within 2 weeks, some voluntarily, others under pressure from subpoenas. A temporary receiver was appointed by the county to manage Crystal Pines until a full restructuring could occur. All decisions now require oversight by an independent compliance officer. And me? Well, I moved back in the following weekend. The place smelled like lavender-scented bleach and unresolved trauma. I hired a cleaning crew, changed every lock in the house, and had the whole place scanned for hidden recording devices. Don't laugh. Michelle once posted a photo of herself holding my smart TV remote upside down. She wasn't exactly subtle. Candace filed a civil suit on my behalf, and a month later, we settled. The total judgment, $410,000. That covered hotel costs, the impound fee, the utility damages, emotional distress, property repairs, and attorney fees, plus a little something for the hell of it. I used part of the money to install reinforced security gates, motion lights, and a solar-powered privacy screen system that could go full blackout with one tap on my phone. HOA friendly enough to not break any actual laws, but menacing enough to make the new board think twice before darkening my doorstep. I also sold off the undeveloped back acre of my land to the city. They're turning it into a public lakefront nature preserve, a permanent green buffer between me and whatever kind of future lunatics might try to crawl out of the Crystal Pines woodwork. But maybe the most unexpected result? People started reaching out. Emails, letters. A guy from South Carolina who went through something similar. A woman from Arizona whose HOA tried to take her property over a garden gnome. I started writing back, then blogging. Then got asked to speak at a housing rights conference in Dallas. Apparently surviving HOA hell earns you a weird kind of credibility. So, now every once in a while, I sit on the upstairs balcony, bourbon in hand overlooking the lake and the trees that no HOA will ever touch again. The villa is mine. The silence is mine. Every inch of space. Every window. Every door. And if anyone ever tries to walk in without my permission again, they won't leave through the front door. They'll leave through court, dragged by their lies, cuffed by their own hubris.